up whatever coffee's in your kitchen right now. Flip it over, find where it says how many cups it makes, and do the math against the brewing instructions printed right below it. If the numbers don't line up, you've just found something with a name. It's called a serving size lawsuit, and one's already been filed against Great Value, Folgers, Maxwell House, and Peet's. That's one problem in this coffee aisle. It's not the only one. The second problem is who's actually making your coffee. 3 familiar names, 3 different price points, and 1 identical parent company that never shows up on the label. The third is a handful of active, unresolved lawsuits over what's actually turning up in the cup pesticide residue, chemical solvents, claims still working their way through the courts right now. 8 brands worth rethinking, 3 that are actually built differently, and 1 10-second test saved for the end, for whatever's sitting on your counter this morning. Number 8. Great Value, Walmart's house brand. You're not buying Great Value because you trust the name. There isn't really a name to trust. It sits on the bottom shelf in a plain canister, usually a few dollars cheaper than the closest name brand next to it. You buy it because it's the cheapest bag in the aisle, and It's Just Coffee feels like a safe enough assumption when the price is this low. Turns out that assumption about the math on the label doesn't hold up either. A 2022 class action, tracked by Truth in Advertising and reported by ClassAction.org, alleges that Great Value ground coffee canisters don't produce the number of cups printed on the label, even when you follow Walmart's own brewing instructions printed on that same can. That one's still open. No confirmed settlement or dismissal on record, so hold it as an allegation, not a fact. The no-frills branding doesn't extend to the serving count, apparently. And if the math is off on the cheapest coffee in the store, wait until you see it happen to the most trusted name in the whole category. Number 7. Folgers. This is the coffee that's been telling you it's the best part of waking up since before most of us were born. It's the default jar in millions of American pantries. The one brand that doesn't need an introduction. That reputation is exactly what the next part sits uncomfortably against. Class action lawsuits filed in California, Florida, and Illinois in 2020 allege that Folgers canisters, labeled to make up to 210 6-ounce cups, actually yielded as many as 54 fewer cups than that, brewed the way Folgers' own instructions say to brew it, according to ClassAction.org. That's the allegation. Here's what actually happened to it. In December of 2025, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the case's class certification, according to Inside Class Actions. Not because the court found the yield claim was accurate, because the judges ruled that figuring out who was actually misled would require looking at each customer's situation individually, which made it a poor fit for one big lawsuit covering everyone at once. That's a procedural loss for the plaintiffs. It is not a verdict that the can is telling the truth. Say that difference out loud, because it matters. Class certification just means a court deciding whether a group of customers can sue together as one case, instead of each filing separately. When that certification gets reversed, the lawsuit doesn't disappear. It just gets a lot harder for anyone to pursue. That's what happened here. It matters even more once you learn Folgers wasn't the only century-old name with the identical complaint. The next one didn't get to walk away on a technicality. It wrote a check. Number 6. Maxwell House. Good to the last drop is one of the oldest slogans in American advertising, and Maxwell House leans on that 100-plus year history hard. The trustworthy, old-fashioned choice. The coffee your grandparents drank. That century of nostalgia is about to collide with a lawsuit. A class action alleged that Maxwell House ground coffee labels overstated how many cups you'd actually get. Claims of 180 to 210 cups per container based on the brewing ratio printed right there on the can. The standard tablespoons of grounds per cup of water measurement most drip coffee makers are built around. The math on the label, the suit alleged, didn't hold up against that ratio. Unlike the Folgers case, this one didn't get thrown out on a technicality. It settled for $16 million in July of 2021, according to Daily Coffee News and Top Class Actions. Consumers who filed a claim could get up to $4.80 without any proof of purchase, or up to $25 with a receipt. Roughly $3.9 million of that settlement went to the plaintiff's attorneys. Kraft Heinz didn't admit any wrongdoing as part of the deal. That's standard in cases like this. But real money changed hands over a real dispute, which is more than you can say for the Folgers case above. Coming up next is a brand that shares something with 2 other names on this list. and you won't find out what until you get there. Number 5. Dunkin, the grocery aisle bags and K-cups sitting next to the big brands. Dunkin sells itself as the accessible, everyday step up. America runs on Dunkin isn't subtle about that positioning. It's coffee for people who want something better than generic, without the price tag or the pretension of a specialty cafe. The orange and pink packaging borrows straight from the drive-through cups you already recognize, which is exactly the point. The grocery bag is designed to feel like a shortcut to the same cup you'd get at the counter. This one isn't a safety issue, it's an ownership issue, and it's a bigger one than it sounds. Dunkin's grocery store ground coffee and K-cups are manufactured by J.M. Smucker, under a licensing partnership that's been in place for more than 15 years. According to reporting from Tasting Table and Food Dive, Smucker is the same company that owns Folgers outright, and owns Cafe Bustelo outright too. Put those three together, Folgers, Dunkin, and Cafe Bustelo, and you're looking at roughly 26% of the entire US at-home coffee category, sitting inside one company's coffee division per Food Dive. On the shelf, those three brands read as three different choices for three different kinds of shoppers: budget, aspirational, and heritage. Structurally, it's one portfolio wearing three outfits. None of the packaging tells you that. Speaking of that heritage outfit, the next brand built its entire identity on being the authentic alternative to corporate coffee. Turns out one of Dunkin's own siblings is wearing that exact disguise. Number 4. Cafe Bustelo. Cafe Bustelo built its identity in Miami, on Cuban espresso roots, and it wears that heritage story hard. The bright yellow can, the strong dark roast, the sense that you're buying something more authentic than a mass market name. Which is a little ironic, given who actually owns it. The same J.M. Smucker we just talked about. But the specific allegation here isn't about ownership, it's about what's inside the can. A 2020 lawsuit filed by the Clean Label Project in federal court in Washington, D.C., alleges that Cafe Bustelo's 10-ounce canned decaf espresso is marketed as pure, while independent lab testing commissioned by the plaintiffs found 130 parts per billion of methylene chloride, according to Bloomberg Law. Here's what that actually means in plain terms. Decaffeinating coffee means pulling the caffeine molecule out of the raw bean before it's ever roasted, and one common way to do that is to bathe the beans in a chemical solvent that binds to caffeine, then rinse the solvent off. Methylene chloride is one of the solvents used for that job. In theory, almost none of it should remain by the time the bean hits your cup. The lawsuit says the lab work found a trace amount anyway. I couldn't confirm how the case was ultimately resolved, so treat this as a pending allegation, not a settled fact. Here's the actual dispute, stated plainly. The coffee industry maintains that residue levels like this stay under food safety limits, and that's not seriously contested. What's contested is whether a can that says pure on the front should have any solvent residue in it at all. That's 4 brands down, and the next one isn't even really an American brand's problem. It's a global one. If that's useful, hitting like tells us to keep going. Number 3. Nescafe, made by Nestlé. If you picture a jar of instant coffee in an American pantry, there's a good chance it's this one. Nescafe is the global default. The brand's so common, it's practically a stand-in for the whole category. That's where global supply chain turns into a global liability. In 2019, Nestlé confirmed that glyphosate, the active ingredient in the weed killer Roundup, was detected in green coffee beans sourced for its products, following reporting out of Germany, according to CNN Business and Bloomberg. Glyphosate is sprayed on farmland to kill weeds between crop rows, and it can end up on or in the plants growing nearby if it drifts, including coffee trees on farms that use it. Nestlé responded by saying it was expanding its testing controls on incoming beans. Now the honest caveat, because this one gets overstated a lot online. Glyphosate is still an approved agricultural chemical in both the US and the EU as of its most recent renewal. This isn't a banned substance turning up where it shouldn't be. It's a supply chain contamination story. Pesticide residue showing up in a raw ingredient sourced from farms Nestlé doesn't fully control. Nestlé's own response, tightening its testing after the fact, is a quiet admission that the controls weren't tight enough before. The next brand doesn't look anything like a corporate giant. That's exactly what makes its problem the strangest one on this list. Number 2. Death Wish Coffee. This is the world's strongest coffee brand, the one that ran a viral Super Bowl ad. Sells almost entirely direct-to-consumer, and has built a reputation as the scrappy, quality-obsessed challenger rather than a mass producer. It doesn't feel like a big brand, it feels like the opposite of one. That image doesn't survive what happens next. In September of 2017, Death Wish Coffee issued an FDA-confirmed recall of its canned nitro cold brew, after testing found the potential for Clostridium botulinum toxin to grow inside the cans, according to the FDA and reporting from CBS News and Fox News. In plain terms, that bacteria can multiply in low oxygen, sealed environments, exactly the kind of environment a sealed, shelf-stable can create, and produce a toxin that attacks the nervous system. That's a real pathogen risk. Botulism can be fatal. The issue was tied to a packaging and processing problem, not something wrong with the coffee itself. This needs a careful caveat, and it's an important one. That recall was on a specific canned, ready-to-drink product. It wasn't the bagged ground coffee you'd actually be buying at a grocery store. A 2023 Momavation lab testing roundup listed Death Wish's ground organic espresso roast as testing non-detect for PFAS, mold, and pesticides, a different product line entirely, made a different way. Don't flatten this into Death Wish coffee caused botulism. The specific product that failed and the bagged coffee on the shelf today aren't the same thing. Which brings us to number 1. And the widest gap between what a brand promises and what a lawsuit alleges anywhere on this entire list. Number 1. Starbucks. Specifically, its packaged at-home coffee line. Starbucks isn't selling you the cheapest coffee or the most convenient coffee, it's selling you the most ethical and highest quality coffee, full stop. That story is the entire premium you're paying for. It's baked into the CAFE practices certification on the bag, into the sourcing language on the website, into the price itself. This is the case that goes after both halves of that story at once. A class action filed on January 13, 2026 by the law firm Hagens Berman alleges that independent testing of Starbucks' decaf house blend found methylene chloride at 22 parts per billion, benzene at 28 parts per billion, reportedly 23 parts per billion above an EPA threshold, and toluene at 87 parts per billion, a chemical the suit says isn't authorized as a food ingredient at all. Benzene and toluene are both industrial solvents, more commonly associated with fuel and manufacturing than food, which is part of why the lawsuit treats their presence as worth flagging at all. The same lawsuit alleges that farms certified under Starbucks' CAFE practices program have had documented labor law violations, including inadequate protective equipment that Starbucks allegedly didn't disclose, despite marketing 100% ethical coffee sourcing. A few things you need to hear clearly here. This is a new, active, unproven lawsuit, filed within the last several months as of this recording, not a settled fact or a court finding. The specific chemical figures come from testing the plaintiffs commissioned themselves, cited in their own complaint, not from an independent government lab. This firm has filed similar chemical residue cases against other companies before, so the pattern is familiar, even if the outcome here isn't decided. But sit with what's actually being alleged for a second. The brand whose entire premium rests on ethically sourced and quality controlled is facing a lawsuit that targets both of those exact claims in the same filing. That's not proof of anything yet. It's the biggest gap between story and allegation in this whole video. Before we get to the brands that actually hold up, one fairness note. Almost everything in that countdown is an allegation, a settlement without an admission of wrongdoing, or a case that got tossed on a technicality. Not a company caught red-handed in open court, and not a single one of these brands has been found by a judge or jury to have deliberately lied to you. That matters. Coffee is also one of the most heavily traded agricultural products on Earth. Sourced through supply chains these companies don't fully control from farm to bag. That makes total oversight genuinely hard. Not just a convenient excuse. None of that erases what got alleged. It just means the fair way to watch this is as a pattern worth knowing, not a set of courtroom verdicts. Now here's who's actually getting it right, starting with the one that still comes with an honest asterisk. Number 3. Peet's Coffee. Peet's built its reputation as a cafe-first coffee roaster before it ever showed up bagged on a grocery shelf. And that origin story is still doing work for it now that it sits next to Folgers and Maxwell House in the same aisle. Peet's earns real credibility here, with one honest asterisk attached. A Mamavation lab testing roundup found Peet's organic ground dark roast came back non-detect for PFAS. Mycotoxins, mold, yeast, and the full pesticide panel tested clean results. Though that's one testing round, not an ongoing government program watching every batch. Here's the asterisk. Back in 2015, Peet's was sued over French press serving sizes, alleged to deliver about 25% less liquid than the 12-ounce and 32-ounce labels on its brewing equipment implied. That's the exact same serving size pattern you just heard about with Great Value, Folgers, and Maxwell House, and it's worth knowing it touched Peet's too, even though this particular case was about the brewing gear, not the coffee itself. You'll find Peet's at most mainstream grocery stores and at its own cafes, at a mid-premium price. Not the cheapest bag on the shelf, not especially splurge either. The next brand skips the asterisk entirely by giving away the one thing most companies protect the hardest, its profits. Number 2, Newman's Own Organic. Newman's Own is fair trade certified and USDA organic, sold through a long-running partnership with Green Mountain and Keurig. But the real structural difference is the ownership model. Every dollar of profit and royalties from Newman's Own goes to the Newman's Own Foundation, a charitable foundation with no shareholders pushing for cheaper sourcing to hit a quarterly number. To be clear about what this research did and didn't find, no recalls, no lawsuits, and no lab testing red flags turned up for Newman's Own organic coffee. That's an absence of findings, plainly stated, because it's a meaningfully weaker claim than proven clean. It is not the same as an independent lab certifying it clean. It's the difference between nothing showed up when we looked and someone tested it and it passed. Both are worth knowing, but they're not the same sentence. It's also one of the more accessible clean picks on this whole list. You'll find it at Target, Walmart, most mainstream grocery stores, and as a Keurig K-Cup. No specialty trip required, no premium-only price tag. Number 1 built something harder to fake than a certification sticker. It handed the people growing the coffee an actual stake in the company selling it. Number 1, equal exchange. Every single brand on this list, avoid or recommend, is either a public company answering to shareholders or a private company answering to a parent corporation's bottom line. Equal exchange is neither. It's a worker-owned cooperative. The people who work there own the company, and it sources coffee through direct, long-term relationships with small farmer co-ops, instead of buying through commodity traders who move beans through several middlemen before they ever reach a roaster. It's certified by the Fair Trade Federation as fairly traded. That's not a marketing claim stapled onto a supply chain built for something else, the way ethical sourcing language sometimes gets used elsewhere on this list. It's the actual structure of the business, from who owns the roastery down to who the farmer is selling to. On top of that structural difference, Equal Exchange's organic fairly traded blend came back non-detect for PFAS, mycotoxins, mold, yeast, and pesticides, in the same Mamavation testing roundup mentioned earlier. You'll find it at Whole Foods, at food co-ops, and online through Walmart.com. It costs more than a can of Folgers. It's priced in line with other specialty coffee, but it's the most accessible option this research found that combines a genuinely different ownership structure with clean test results. If you only change one purchase after watching this is the one worth making. Here's a test that takes about 10 seconds to start, and it works on any bag of coffee, any brand on this list or off it. Stir 1 teaspoon of grounds into a glass of room temperature water, then leave it alone for 5 minutes without touching it. Pure ground coffee spreads out gradually and releases its color into the water evenly, a little at a time, the way you'd expect from ground-up beans. A bulking filler, something like clay or a chicory-style additive used to stretch the product, behaves differently. It settles into a distinct layer at the bottom, usually a different texture or color than the coffee floating around it. Sometimes almost gritty compared to the coffee itself. This is a traditional adulteration check pulled from food safety consumer education. And to be fair, nothing in this research points to a confirmed filler problem in mainstream American coffee specifically. It still costs nothing, takes 10 seconds to set up, and now you know how to run it before you ever pour a cup. So here's the pattern. In one line, the real problem in this category isn't poison in the can. It's math on the label and ownership hidden behind 3 different logos. You just watched all three of those play out. Hold on to that pattern, not any single headline, especially the 2 lawsuits still working their way through the courts right now. None of this means panic dumping your pantry. It doesn't mean every canister on your counter is lying to you. It means reading past the logo, running the 10-second check when you're not sure, and putting your money toward the brands that are actually built differently, not just marketed that way. Small habit, real difference over a year of morning coffee. If you know someone who drinks the same cup of coffee every single morning without ever once reading the can, send them this. They're exactly who this video is for.